Lucian Niemeyer.
Hello, Taylor.
Thank you so much for joining us. This is a big deal. It's such an honor to have you in from Washington, D.C.
It's an honor to be here.
So why don't you start by telling us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure thing. So I grew up in the Philadelphia area. Go Eagles. And
You had to get that in.
particularly with the game against the Rams yesterday. Ultimately, I ended up going to school for architecture. After 5 years of studying, I had to promise in order to graduate that I would never practice architecture because I wasn't that good. So I decided, no problem, I'm going to go fly jets for the Air Force. That lasted only about 6 months. The Air Force told me you're never going to fly a jet. So I ended up building air bases around the world for the Air Force for 15 years. So from there, I ended up being in Washington, D.C. I got an offer to work for the United States Senate Armed Services Committee. So I worked for Senators John Warner and, yes, the John Warner who was married to Liz Taylor.
Right.
And then ultimately John McCain. So you and I both know
Yes.
Senator McCain. And then did that for 11 years. Really focused on energy issues for our nation from there. So not just Department of Defense, but for the whole country.
Was McCain a big energy guy?
Yes, he was. Yeah, he was as chairman and ranking member and chairman of the Armed Services Committee. We realized that energy was an essential part, not just of our economy, but our nation's security. So he put me to work on that for a solid 11 years. Finally retired, got out of federal service for a short amount of time, became a consultant, made a ton of money, went back into the Pentagon as the Assistant Secretary of Defense for all energy, insulation, and environmental programs. So worked that job, was Assistant Secretary of the Navy for a while, and then ultimately went up to the White House the last year. So I've been kind of working national defense issues for pretty much my entire career. Left federal service, felt like I needed to continue to give back. As you know, that's always a noble endeavor. So I started two nonprofits, one for cybersecurity, which we will have to have another episode to talk about national cyber threats, and then one on nuclear energy. So I started a nonprofit 4 years ago. So I am currently doing nonprofit work, and I'm also doing some work with friends of ours to develop power plants and data centers for our nation. So yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
That's perfect. You brought us right to where we can begin this.
Absolutely.
Energy.
Yes.
Let's talk about energy and all the misinformation and important information and why you are such a big believer, as am I, in nuclear energy as being the cleanest form right now.
It is definitely a focus of our nation. You know, for decades we've been pretty good on conserving electricity, so we haven't really seen a significant gap between the supply we have as a nation and the demand. And all that changed a couple years ago. We started looking at emerging digital technologies like AI and machine learning and crypto, and all of a sudden you're starting to see an increasing demand on the grid that we had not anticipated. Then you look at all the electric vehicles we want to put on charging stations. We want electrifying parts of our economy we've never had before. Plus, we're going with robotics. So all that runs on electricity. So we've really been hit as a nation with a significant increase in demand over the last 3 years. It's only going to get greater. I mean, the concern I have, and I've been talking about this around the country, is right now the programs we have in place for generating new plants is falling way behind the demand that we need as a nation. And my biggest concern, and I've been talking about this wherever I can, is reliability has to be the number one goal. We cannot afford as a country to have the lights go out. People will get killed. I like to say that when you're making decisions about priorities about energy, we can't kill people while we're trying to decarbonize them. It doesn't matter after a while.
Well,
So
they're both killing them. It just depends how quickly. And
losing power, it kills today. Climate or concerns. That's definitely a concern. But as it stands right now, we are in what has been declared a national energy emergency. That we have to start looking at generating more power to meet our needs.
Okay, can we unpack this a little bit for
Sure.
the layperson? So I think a lot of people don't understand or recognize the significant amount of energy it requires to run AI programs.
Yeah, that's just one use, but you're right. So we do a normal internet query, that we've been using for decades. It takes a certain amount of electricity to generate that response. When you look at artificial intelligence and where we're headed, that same query, and those queries can get much more advanced, as far as what you want to know about. That research that goes into that query in split seconds requires 10 times the amount of energy. So of electricity. So really, when you look at AI, it's converting electricity into data, into information that we can use. And I'm not saying we get rid of AI. I think AI can do so much good for our society. Eventually, we're going to be able to cure cancer with AI. We're going to have engineering achievements using artificial intelligence. I mean, the benefit to our society is going to be significant. The issue is we have to have the electricity and the power in place to enable that, to have that supply chain for AI.
Okay, now you and I are both of the belief that nuclear is the way to go.
Yes.
Before we get into that, can we dispel why wind power is not the way to go?
Well, I mean, wind and solar, you divide our demand in our nation into two buckets. Base load, which is what we need to have 24/7 running for our electricity base. And then you have peak demand.
For the grid, to keep the grid
right?
running.
And that's base load power. Now, in the evenings, when our nation sees a peak use of electricity, you want to have peak power. So wind and solar are intermittent power sources. The wind's not always blowing and the sun's not always shining. And so you want to use those sources as a way to balance it out, but you can't move more into the renewables and away from base load because you put volatility on the grid. And it's not just me saying this. I mean, if you look at national studies, there's an organization I hope your listeners will tune into. It's the North American Electric Reliability Corporation. By the way, it's North America because we share our grid with Canada. And so they do semi-annual reports about the volatility on the grid brought on by intermittent power sources and how power companies have to adjust for that. So there is definitely a place for wind and solar, but not for the dispatchable baseload power we need to keep the lights on all the time.
What is that place?
It's definitely, right now we rely on about 40% natural gas, about 16 to 17% nuclear power, and about 10 to 15% of coal. Those are our three primary base load power sources. Hydro, all the dams we have, that's about 6%. Those are running 24/7. That's really the basis for our power grid. Wind and solar are, although they're increasing, you have to account for the fact that you can design a wind farm to have a certain amount of capacity, but the actual output sometimes is a fraction of that capacity.
Right.
Because the wind's not blowing and sometimes the turbines are going south. So then you're running maybe in some cases 20% of effectiveness or 20% of output versus the design capacity. And same thing with solar. Sometimes you're not getting that one-for-one design capacity versus what the output is. And so not only that, solar panels deteriorate over a series of years and their efficiency goes down.
I mean, but there's no question that there is enough solar power on the planet to keep the planet running solely by solar.
Look, I mean, there are goals. A lot of states, nations have goals for increasing their use of renewables. Now, what I like to discuss, let's talk fuel sources at 99.9% reliability. So when I get on stage and I'm advocating for nuclear power, and I'm on stage with somebody who says we need to continue to build wind and solar, I was let's level the playing field first. Let's say, great. Here's what nuclear can give you: 99.9% reliability, 365 days a year, 24/7. What does it take to get wind and solar to that? Well, they start hemming and hawing. I said it takes storage at significant scale, batteries, to be able to get to that 99.9% reliability. Now let's look at the environmental costs of all those batteries: the lithium, the cobalt, the silver, all the chemicals that got to be pulled out, or materials that have got to be pulled out of the ground and then refined and mined and then disposed of. I mean, if we were to actually build batteries at scale to get to that reliability issue, on top of what we're doing with the electric vehicle market, the waste streams from all these batteries with toxic chemicals would overwhelm us. So there's an environmental cost to whatever the fuel source is. All I want to do with you and others is say, let's have an honest discussion, an equal discussion about what are the pros and cons for each energy source.
Why do you think the far left doesn't understand that?
I think it's not just a far left. We all advocate for what we think is the right thing to do. And so, there are folks that believe that wind and solar is the future, and it may be the future if we can come up with a way to better store power.
It's not the immediate future.
Right. And we have some volatility. I mean, right now we have a huge problem with electric vehicles that are spontaneously combusting. You're not far from here, we still have a 800 meg storage facility that's still burning, caught fire. So we have some issues we have to resolve on the engineering of storage for it truly to become a safe alternative, whereby then would enable wind and solar to be more of a powerful source, for electricity for us.
Right, and the storage of it alone isn't very efficient, is it?
Well, it costs, so that's why you have to look at the life cycle cost for wind and solar. And particularly look at a nuclear power plant. We have 92 operating in this country right now. They've been operating for 60 years. The relative replacement cost for a wind farm, you have to replace every 20 years. Solar arrays, you have to replace the panels every 15 to 20 years. So you got to look at the life cycle cost of the full stream from mining and manufacturing, refining, all the way through disposal. I think once we start having that discussion, and we need it in this country, I think it'll be clearer, and then you focus on reliability is the number one thing. So maybe where I differ from folks on the other side of the aisle is I've prioritized reliability over sustainability. I think what keeps people alive today is having power on all the time. And even here in California, you're starting to see, hey, cut back on your power use. The grid is strained here in California. And I would say it's because we've de-emphasized fossil fuels. We've tried to shut down nuclear power plants. We're on this war against fossil fuels, and it's eventually there's going to be a significant cost for us. And I'm not sure we're aware of what that cost is. I think you're starting to see it with your rising electricity rates, but that's because
my bills are outrageous.
Yeah, your bills are outrageous because our supply is not keeping up with demand. I mean, that's just basic in economics. If you're killing your supply by retiring gas plants and coal plants, and you're just denying yourself the supply that you're going to need, then the cost is going to go up.
Okay, so let's talk about your solution to the problem.
Yeah, so my solution is threefold. First of all, I started a nuclear energy nonprofit for a reason, because a lot of folks still point to Chernobyl, they point to 3 Mile Island, they point to Fukushima and saying, look, nuclear power is not safe. And I would say, there definitely were 3 major accidents. As you know, we've talked. Nobody was killed, but
nobody was killed in
the
3
risk
Mile
was
Island.
significant.
Right.
It is risk. And more people are concerned about the safety. More importantly, people are concerned about the spent fuel rods, which are not waste. They're just spent fuel rods. So a couple of things there. What I believe and what I've seen, and anybody that is interested in finding out about nuclear power, where we're at today, needs to go on to the website for the Idaho National Lab, run by the Department of Energy, where they're doing a lot of research on what we call advanced reactors, which is comparing our legacy reactor, which was built or designed 60 years ago, with ones that are being designed today that have significantly reduced the risk from the fuel that's being used, how it's being disposed of, and ultimately the cooling for reactors. So what happened in Fukushima is the backup power got swamped by the tsunami, which then shut down the cooling.
Blew it out.
Our legacy reactors require fresh water to cool it. The new reactors, advanced reactors, what we call Generation 3, 5, Generation 4, have other ways to cool that reactor that don't require water. So it's like comparing a plane from 60 years ago or a car from 60 years ago to a car or a plane that's designed today on the safety. Safety is so much more significant, and we've reduced the risk to almost to zero of having any kind of incident that was similar to 3 Mile Island.
Right, and the risk in Chernobyl, that was human error.
Well, that was human error, yeah. And that was just
catastrophic, but it was human error.
And it still remains an environmental disaster. I'm not denying that. I'm saying that the engineering and the technology has come leaps and bounds since those reactors were put into place in the 60s.
So let's talk about how clean. I mean, for me, what I love about nuclear is how clean the energy is.
It is. And then, matter of fact, that was a decision that was made by Governor Newsom here in California to extend the life of the one remaining nuclear power plant in Diablo, because it is a clean energy source, and it provides 10% of the power for the state.
So are they reopening?
They extended the life. So they're on a path to closure.
I thought it was closed. I didn't realize it
Nope.
was a path.
They were in the process of starting the decommissioning process and closure process, and there was an extension because of the understanding that California needs electricity, affordable, clean electricity. So nuclear power is a great solution for that. I mean, you've got power plants reopening around the country. I mean, you and I are sitting here today. If you'd have told me 2 years ago, Taylor, that somebody would pay to reopen 3 Mile Island Reactor 1, I would say there's no way. And then when you would tell me that it happens to be a hyperscaler, in other words, an AI data center developer who wants to spend the money to reopen 3 Mile Island, think of the optics of that. You know, why would we want to open 3 Mile Island? Because we need the power. We need that electricity. And so we're starting to look at closures, not just of nuclear power plants, but of gas plants. You had another hyperscaler buy a 600 meg gas plant in Mississippi that had been decommissioned to reopen it for electricity. So you've got a lot of folks making very radical decisions in the last 2 years because we need electricity. And nuclear, to me, is a significant answer for that.
Right, and the disposal of it seems to also be relatively...
Yeah, and I appreciate that. And look, if you look at when you pull out a spent fuel rod out of a legacy reactor, there is no more formal process in the entire world for the handling of that spent fuel rod. In other words, we have landfills filled with batteries, we have landfills filled with solar panels, we have landfills filled with a lot of different things, chemicals, but we control and manage those spent fuel rods very significantly. And we store them in special cases, and we store them in special places. The amazing thing is the French, and now we are starting to reprocess those rods. Right. So there's an industry stat that the spent fuel, the energy in the spent fuel rods we have, is enough energy to power this country for 200 years without any other power source.
Right. So then this brings me back to my question: why do we need coal? This is where you and I...
That's another question. You were talking nuclear, but...
I was, but if we have enough to power the country for the world for 200 years, why do we need coal?
So coal has been, accounts for about between 18 and 16%, depends on who you talk to, for our total electricity. It's not that we need to build more, although the Chinese and the Indians and other folks, the Chinese are building the coal plant a week.
They're also building nuclear powers.
They are too, but what I'm saying is they're building everything. Right. So for us to say we're only going to put our eggs in 2 baskets or a couple of baskets and not diversify our fuel source, particularly since this country still has a lot of coal, is insane. More importantly, your rates are going up as well as other rates around the country because we've prematurely closed coal plants, because we prematurely closed fuel plants, fossil fuel or natural gas plants, to meet a political mandate without replacing that supply. So I'm not saying we need more coal plants or to start building all over the place. I'm saying keep the ones we have that are open, figure out where we can recommission those that we close and keep them open because we need electricity, and figure out where we have technology that can scrub some of the toxins out of the burnt, the coke.
There's a lot of evidence that technology does not work. It's ineffective.
There's also evidence that it does work, and more importantly, there's byproducts in that coal, lithium and other chemicals that we can use. So we do.
But there's also mercury and other toxins
which we manage. So it boils down to what do we want to prioritize? If we're prioritizing reliability, then we want to diversify our fuel source. For prioritizing climate change or environmental concerns, we want to narrow down to those that don't have an environmental impact. Problem is there's costs for that, and every dream we have has a cost. And I would love a clean environment. You would love a clean environment. We want to stop world hunger. We want to stop war.
I don't understand why you have to prioritize where it's 100%. Your priority is 100% the imminence of the danger.
I'm not prioritizing coal. I'm just saying that coal has a role to play to keep the lights on. It's a very easy source to build a plant around, and it's a very reliable fuel source. So I'm saying
I just can't get past the toxicity of it. That's where I'm stuck.
But I'm getting. We got toxins in our batteries. I mean, lithium batteries are exploding every day. How come you're not worried about that? I mean, you got 2 freighters that have gone down to the bottom of the ocean because they had EVs on them and they caught fire. Where's the environmental hazard of that? So what I'm getting at is every fuel source, every generation source has some type of environmental hazard. I would say If you look at the stats,
Well, that's where the wind and solar people come
but there's
in.
also
Right,
there's
of
also a
course.
risk with that, as with nuclear.
And
So every fuel source has an inherent risk. Now the question is, how do we use technology to mitigate that risk and reduce it, and at what cost?
Right, and that's what you're working on right now. You're building
Finding that balance.
Right, finding that balance.
Yeah.
Is there a balance to be found?
There should be, yeah. I feel personally that our over-reliance on renewable sources over the last few years, and more importantly, our active denial of natural gas capabilities, particularly in the Northeast United States, is going to lead to people getting killed. Just flat out, I believe that. When the lights don't go on, when there's no more heat, because there's not enough natural gas in certain parts of the country, people are going to die. That is my biggest concern right now. Is how do you keep that from happening?
How imminent do you believe that is? Like, what's your time frame?
It's not mine. If you look at reports put out by various organizations, as soon as 2028, we're going to have certain parts of the country whereby the peak demand exceeds what they are capable of. Perfect example of that is what happened in Texas in 2021. I think it was 21, where the cold. It was the middle of the winter. All of a sudden, the plants shut down. People were dying. So that has a impact. And so we can't put ourselves in a situation. Now we have 6 North American grids. ERCOT, which is mainly Texas, was the one that was affected by that outage. It would be great for us to interconnect them so they have the flexibility to get power from somewhere else in the country.
The 6 are not interconnected?
No, that was the big issue. Well, no, the 5 of the 6 are ERCOT sit separately.
I see.
So, and that was a big issue, is that that grid could not draw power from other parts of the country to be able to compensate. They relied on their natural gas, their nuclear, their wind and solar. Wind and solar underperformed during the wintertime. And that's what led to, the power going out. We can't afford that in this country, not just for human existence, but for our economy, for all the things that we rely on power for our families. I mean, the power goes out, things start to happen very bad in a bad way.
How much more power do we need?
So it is scary. So we were, if you look at the estimates for 3 years ago, we were running about a 1.5% to 2% need for increase in power per year. We're up over 6% now. So that means we need to add 80 gigawatts per year. So let me give you an example. Okay. We have 92 power plants in this country. Nuclear power plants. Each power plant is running between 800 meg and 1.2. So we got to build another 80 legacy nuclear reactors per year to be able to meet the demand. So when you start looking at these numbers, you're like, oh my gosh, how are we going to do this? Particularly in this country where permitting, local zoning, local public utilities commissions, all that takes years. Transmission. We haven't built the transmission lines that we need to even move the power around the country. So we've got a regulatory burden that the Chinese don't have, that the Russians don't have, that no one has. We have it because we want to meet certain requirements to include environmental protection. We've got to have all these permitting and regulations that are getting in the way. And that's when the current administration is really focused on that, permitting relief to allow us to accelerate the development of these deals, of these projects.
How did nuclear PR go so wrong?
And
how do we reverse that?
Yeah, so I mean, look, there was a lot of concern in this country, rightly so, after 3 Mile Island, what it could have been, and there was also a feeling that nuclear war is bad. So therefore, uranium and plutonium are bad.
People confuse nuclear war with
it's the non-proliferation is the word. The non-proliferation crowd really doesn't want uranium being extracted out of the ground because it could lead to nuclear weapons. Those are all legitimate concerns, and I'm not saying that was a bad thing, but there was really nobody countering, saying but nuclear power is a clean energy source. Remember, we only started thinking about clean about 20 years ago, so it was in the 70s. The 70s is when it really started.
Well, as I said to you earlier, I think the Rockefellers had a lot to do with this.
Yeah, well,
I have to.
They're coal people. So,
I thought they were gas too, but as you said, they're coal people. But they really started
Yeah, I think
a
look,
negative campaign
more
on.
what I had to deal with when I was in the Senate. I had to deal with the fact that renewable sources was defined, at least in some statutes, as only wind and solar. So it took me forever, and just now is our public officials starting to say, okay, green energy includes nuclear, but man, that's a struggle. And you know who the biggest opponents are? The wind and solar people, because they want to be the emphasis. So all of a sudden you say, okay, now the nuclear is a green power source. Now they're like, wait a minute, all the money is going to go there, which is exactly what happened in the most recent legislation, where wind and solar tax credits, were eliminated, and nuclear.
Would you go as far as to call those people naive?
No, I don't think they're naive. I think they believe in a certain outcome. It's just that you have to ask yourself, like I mentioned earlier, every dream's got a cost. Okay. I would love to live in a world where we're only on wind and solar. We're not there. I mean, so I've always believed, and I grew up, in a family that was, very liberal, and I realized, okay, there are dreamers in the world. The world needs dreamers. The world needs the ones, okay, here's where we need to be. And then you also need the realists. How do we get there, and what are we dealing with today? And so I think the goal is to find that balance and have a discourse like you and I are having. What should the goals be? But more importantly, what do we have to deal with to get there?
Well, what sort of fascinated me about you when I met you was that you're a nature photographer, and your father was a nature photographer, and it's, I guess when I first thought about it, I think it's very ironic to have a guy who's in your field promoting these types of energy, and then realize that you actually really do have a deep respect for the environment.
Oh yeah,
it's your lineage.
Look, everything is sacred to me. I'd rather photograph something in nature than do anything else to it. I'm not a hunter. I'm a god awful fisherman. I don't really like it, but I do have a sincere appreciation and a love for the things around me. So,
right, so you want to see the planet thrive.
Oh gosh, I would love to plant trees the rest of my life. I think that's a huge issue. We're deforesting too much in this world. I would love to ultimately preserve the beautiful environment here in California by engaging in selective cleaning out of all the brush that's doesn't catch fire. I mean, there's a lot of things that we can do individually to go ahead and ensure we live in a safer, pristine environment, and clean water. Hell yeah, absolutely. I love hiking, camping, I'm all that. But I also understand that we have certain needs as a society, electricity and water, they're absolutely essential. And so you have to focus on what can we do to get to that level of reliability while enabling our society to bring on new technologies. I mean, I go back to artificial intelligence. We had a discussion the other night. Well, maybe we should just stop doing artificial intelligence. We're not.
By the way,
stop.
that did not come from me.
Yeah, we're not.
The genie back in the bottle.
We're not going to stop. You know what I mean?
Right.
It is like
it's
like the internet. It's like everything else. It has so much opportunity for good, so much opportunity for benefit, as long as we know how to use it correctly, and it does not get bigger than us, which I don't think it will. So we want to encourage these technologies. We want to and benefit from the amazing innovation that's going to come about of them. We just got to make sure that we've got the electricity there to be able to empower them. Just like we should be driving around in electric vehicles. Eventually the technology will get better. We should be doing that. There's a lot of folks that don't like the limitations from an EV now. And more importantly, if the lights go out, guess what? No EV when the lights go out, the power goes out, no electric vehicles. So we have to kind of ensure we have a diversity of power sources in order to get us that quality and living that we want.
Do you drive an EV?
No.
Do you like them?
I actually drive I have a couple of cars, but the car that I'm definitely gonna bug out during the zombie apocalypse is my Jeep Rubicon. It does not have a microchip in it. It's raised up. It's got the zombie package. So
kind of like mine.
Yeah. So bottom line here is the fact that I'm not willing right now, and I think there's a lot of Americans that feel the same way, to take on the limitations of driving in just an EV, particularly with the infrastructure not in place. More importantly, is it does put you at risk. If the power's not on for whatever reason, you're done. So I think having the diversity.
Happened to a friend of mine during the fires.
Yeah,
her car was in charge and she couldn't get out.
Can get out. So you've got when you're totally relying on electricity, and it doesn't work, there's nothing else you can turn to. I think that's why the diversity, even at a personal level, of having a generator in your home that's run off gas is a good thing, because you've got an alternative. When the power goes out, you have an alternate way to generate electricity. So I think that's how we need to look at diversity as ultimately being much more important to us, particularly for our existence.
So what's the 5-year plan to get us through 2028?
We have to accelerate generation. So that's what I'm focused on my entire life right now.
How are
Taylor.
you going about that?
So I'm part of a group that has found a way to use public lands to build generation. So
Public land is government land.
Yeah, government land to start building power plants of different sizes and sources. We can use anything. We're really focusing on natural gas and nuclear. It's geothermal, but we'll go anywhere and put anything on there.
Yeah, we haven't spoken about geothermal.
Yeah, we'll get to that in a minute, I'm sure. And then the goal is how do you finance it? And so you have a significant demand for artificial intelligence. And look, I live in Northern Virginia. There are more data centers within 5 miles where I live than anywhere in the world. And there's a concern that with all these data centers going up, there's no more power. And we can't even build a Chick-fil-A out where I live right now because there's no more power. We have to fix that. And there are communities starting to rise up around the country saying, hey, we need electricity for our kids and grandkids. And I'm like, definitely, you sure do. I 100% agree. So the question becomes, how do you start building the artificial intelligence facilities, the manufacturing base, the data centers, in a way that you're also building power at the same time? And one can finance the other. You've seen that already, where hyperscalers are paying for bringing back nuclear power plants. How can you then incentivize that hyperscaler to build a power generation plan? And for me, from our group, we believe that's best done on public land. So basically, you don't have the regulatory hurdles you might have in a private deal. Right. You don't have to worry about communities rezoning in a bad way. So our goal is to...
Does the government become your partner?
Yes, absolutely.
So people don't love that.
Well, they don't. Hey, look, let's put it this way. Me personally, I can even have a data center in my backyard or over on the back 40 of a federal installation. Guess where I'm going to put that data center? Particularly if they're going to build a power plant.
Right, because you think it's safer.
Not only that, but they're building the power plant, so there's going to be no deterioration of my ability to get power for other jobs. I mean, we're trying to bring back manufacturing in this country. Manufacturing needs electricity. If you're going ahead and putting in 15 data centers, okay, that's not a lot of jobs, but there goes your power. But if you have a chance to put a manufacturing capacity in there, I'd rather that can generate 1,000 jobs. I'd rather have that. So we're pushing the idea that if you start building these data centers that our country needs, in addition to the power plant, collectively at the same time, you're no longer drawn off the grid. That's good for everybody.
Right, but you're always going to have those people that are concerned about the government having anything to do with their power.
No, agreed. And look, it can be difficult to work with the government. In this case, all we really need is some type of land agreement.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
Yeah,
so
we'll do the rest.
Really just your.
They would give us the land.
They're going to give you the land.
Yeah, and there's a lot of support with that within the current White House to say, okay, what do we work with the Department of Energy, Department of Defense, Department of War now, and other agencies, Department of Interior, to offer up federal land so we can ultimately build more power plants.
Let's talk about the whole Department of War. What do you think about that name change?
Well, remember, I came from the Department of Defense, and so I'm also a military veteran. Whatever we can do to message to our adversaries that we are strong and that we ultimately are forward-leaning is good for me. 'Cause I don't want to send my son or daughter to war. And the stronger we are now, the stronger we can go ahead and use other than military means to go ahead and deter or reduce our ability, our need to fight a war. So if the Secretary of Defense or the President believes by renaming the Department of Defense is going to in some way be provocative to our adversaries, I'm all for it. Anything we can do to message to our adversaries that we mean business, we know what we're doing, and you don't want to mess with us.
You don't think the world believes that America means business?
I don't know. I think there have been times in the past where we may not have projected that strength, that we wanted to be more conciliatory. We wanted to apologize for our prior provocative actions. That sounds good. It makes people feel great for the day. But what does it really do for the situation in the world, particularly when you acknowledge, and then maybe this is a fundamental difference. If you believe there's bad guys in the world, there's bad people, and there's evil in the world, then you want to be strong. If you feel eventually you can work together and everyone can get along and everybody's fine, then you don't believe we need that. So I think it all depends on how you look at the world.
Right. Okay. Right. I don't like that kind of messaging at all, but I understand your point of view, and I
If you're in the
appreciate you.
military and you don't want to go to war.
I appreciate. Listen, if you're a civilian, you don't want to go to war.
So there's whatever we can do to make sure that our adversaries
It
understand
depends
that.
on what you believe is the right messaging and the right way to avert. So you say that the government is currently working with you. Will that change according to the next election?
No, I don't think so. Because it was actually President Biden who put out an executive order right before he left office on requiring the Department of Defense, the Department of Energy to look for sites to put up power plants and data centers. So when you look at those two national priorities, that's a bipartisan issue. Now, how do you go about getting there? The election may differ on that. What are the means for accomplishing the end goal? But as it stands today, I think there's a pretty broad understanding across both aisles that we do need to build more power plants. We do need to address that huge gap between supply and demand, which is only going to get greater, and then to get after it pretty aggressively. So.
In terms of nuclear, we're pretty far behind China at this point, aren't we?
We are. Yeah, they're building next generation reactors, small reactors. More importantly, what the Chinese are doing, and the Russians to some degree, is using their technology as a coercive foreign policy effect. In other words, they'll go into a third world country saying, "Hey, we're going to build you some power plants, and we're going to pay for them." And the country's like, "Fantastic," but then now they're in that country for the next 50 years. So we're seeing this happen all around the world.
So you're saying it's Chinese expansion?
It is, and look, I'll be the first to admit we did the same thing post World War II.
We
used
did.
our energy companies. We went overseas and we went and built these relationships with countries. The Chinese are doing it very effectively, particularly with nuclear technology. And look, we allowed our uranium development. So we shut down uranium enrichment for decades in this country. And you know who we were buying our fuel from for our nuclear power plants? From Russia.
From Russia.
Right. So we've had
Biden pulled that one too.
Yeah, we had to
Close
pull
it down
we
here.
had to pull it. We had to pull out of that. So now we're trying to build up our uranium mining and enrichment capability, which I firmly believe in. We should have had that all along. So I believe restoring what I call a robust nuclear industrial base to include the fuel, to include building, having developers, and ultimately moving towards construction is really important for us, not just for the United States, but as we can offer to our allies, along with our allies, hey, nuclear technology is the way to go for countries that are struggling off of Russian gas. I mean, what's going on in Europe right now with the reliance on Russian gas needs to be reversed.
Yeah.
So you've got a lot of countries in Europe saying, hey, we want to use American developers. We want to cut a deal with an American reactor developer. Now, how do we get the government today to go ahead and invest in those developers to make sure we can export that technology? And it's not just this administration. The Biden administration was very pro-nuclear the last 3 years, of saying, hey, we've got to start and re-energize our domestic ability to be able to build reactors. So we're just continuing that and putting it on steroids. President Trump put the executive orders out on nuclear power, but it wasn't like President Biden wasn't doing the same thing. And I'm sure a future administration is going to continue to focus on that.
Just because the facts are there.
It's reality.
And I mean, ultimately, I guess the ultimate goal would be to go 100% nuclear, or you always want diversification?
No, I think you need the diversity, because if you go 100% nuclear, you're relying on one supply chain, one nuclear. And I think the best thing is to have a full range of sources, particularly to invest in technologies that make those sources cleaner.
So you always like the idea of fossil fuels?
I like the idea of fossil fuels. I like the continued investment to reduce its impact to the environment. I think that's an absolutely essential factor. I just want to make sure that we don't go overboard, which is what I mentioned earlier about restoring the balance. I believe today we're de-emphasizing fossil fuels to the point where it's hurting us. It's putting risk in lives. So we got to find that balance, restore that balance.
In terms of climate change, I'm sure you don't like this question. How much of a threat, an imminent threat, do you think it is? I would not agree with prior administrations who have said it's the most significant national security threat. I can name about 10 things that are a higher threat today. Can you name 5 right now?
Sure. Yeah, we have a cyber threat. We have nation states that are actually attacking our water systems today. We have the Chinese who have admitted they've planted cyber bombs in our infrastructure, in our water systems, our power systems, and our communication systems. I hope your listeners will look up, attacks called Volt Typhoon and Sol Typhoon. I mean, this is scary stuff. I mean, it's gotten to the point.
What are Sultai?
It's two Chinese versions of malware. One, Sol Typhoon, went into our telecoms, so they hacked into the president's phones. They hacked into the telecoms, and they were able to actually prepare themselves to deny those communications. Volt Typhoon was another Chinese malware introduced in 2021, discovered in 23, where they can embedded cyber bombs. And it was virtual bombs that into our power systems, into our water systems and fuel lines, things like that, that they would lay dormant, live off the land. And then
what do they look like? How big are they?
It's a virtual attack. It's a malware. It's like your computer virus.
So they're undetectable.
They're undetectable. Well, we're looking for them.
So it's just a cyber attack.
But they're also,
you think a cyber attack is
Oh my gosh, much more of a threat to our existence than anything to do with climate change.
Why?
Because one keystroke, you can hit that computer right there. One keystroke, you can shut down power. I mean, one keystroke, you can poison water, or you can ultimately disrupt a fuel line. I mean, you can cause catastrophic damage off a keyboard. I mean, and that's unbelievable to me, and we're not talking about it as a country. So you asked the question, what are bigger threats than climate change?
Do you think COVID was?
That's another one. Intentionally manufactured biohazards.
Right. I think COVID was.
As you know, I mean, I agree with you that it was definitely manufactured in a lab with the intent of being used.
Exactly.
And so biohazards, oh my gosh, that's a huge risk for us. So I can go on. Kinetic threats right now. What has happened. What the Russians did to the Ukrainian economy from just unmanned systems. They launched unmanned systems out of the back of commercial trucks. Think about driving down the highways here. How many commercial trucks do you see around? They launched a significant attack on military bases from the back of commercial trucks. So you can manufacture these unmanned systems, these swarm drones, to take down aircraft, to attack substations or attack infrastructure. That's a huge threat too. And then you have what was going on with hypersonics and other new weapon systems by our adversaries. Yes, you and I lived with that threat during the Cold War. The concern for nuclear annihilation, mutually assured destruction. But now you've got conventional weapons that can hit us so fast to the point where just short of a nuclear war, huge risk. So I actually testified before Congress all the risks that were higher than climate change, and I testified to a Democratic committee. They weren't too happy either. But I labeled all these things that I'm looking at, I'm focusing on in Department of Defense that to me are more of a threat than the concern about rising sea levels.
And do you have any hope for a nation where we're not always at war, or we always don't have to be on the either offense or defense? Don't you think we're becoming do you have faith that we're becoming a more conscious and evolved being?
Of course, I would want all of us to do that. I mean, at some point, we're going to have to convince the people who are opposed to what America stands for that it's not in their best interest to be opposed to it. That we're not a resident evil. We offer in this country the land of opportunity. Now, not everybody won't agree with that, but I think if you look at all the folks that want to come to this country because they want that land of opportunity, I mean, that's a selling point right there. We're not building walls to keep people from leaving, which is what the Soviet Union did. We're building walls because so many people want to come in this country. So as long as we're that beacon on a hill, that shining light, there are folks that don't believe the same things, and so we become a risk to them or a threat to them. And that's I'm not sure we'll ever really get out of that loop. I would love to live in a peaceful world, but we've been fighting wars as long as humans have been alive. So thousands of years because of differences.
Less
in opinion.
deadly now, though, to some degree. Less frequently.
Yeah, but still the risk is there. And more importantly, we've become so technologically advanced as a society, and we love that. We love the fact that off your iPhone you can check your HVAC system, you can check the things in your home, you can do all your banking online, you can do all these things. So we become so reliant on technology, and it's so easy to disrupt or to get into your personal life now. You didn't have to worry about someone hacking into your bank accounts 30 years ago. So we have all this technology, we have all this advancement. We've created risk for ourselves. So even at a personal level, now how do we mitigate
Right,
that
we
risk?
create a risk,
Yeah.
and then we have to find out how to mitigate.
Well, that's my other nonprofit, which I would love to come back and talk to you about how do we, my nonprofit's called buildingcybersecurity.org. And that's, we have experts that have been working on how do you mitigate risk from the technologies, not from the data. You worry about your data being stolen or your identity being stolen. I'm more worried about your car being hacked into, or your home being hacked into, or buildings being hacked into, and creating a physical threat.
Bank accounts being hacked.
Well, no, more just physical stuff. Like when the fire control system, someone gets in there and hacks that, and then all of a sudden you're having to run for your life because there's a fire alarm.
I see what you're saying.
So I'm worried about the harm and the chaos that can be sowed by attacks to technology from a keyboard. And so that's a whole other issue. That's a whole other nonprofit we'd love to come talk to you about.
What are the names of your nonprofit?
So buildingcybersecurity.org, and then on the nuclear power one, United Coalition for Advanced Nuclear Power. So UCAN Power.
And you speak all around the world on these topics.
I do.
Are you well received, or do you get mixed reception?
It depends. I mean, I'm on stage. I think we have the discussion that we're having, in some cases, which I would like to do more of a debate. What we've happened in our society, Taylor, is that we have these folks that go public speaking, but there's no counter opinion. So we've turned into like cylinders of messaging, right?
Right, you're just getting back your own.
Yeah, and so you're talking to an audience that's there because they want to be there. So we've turned into a click society, Taylor, where you're listening to what you want to hear, you're reading what you want to read, you're going to listen to somebody who you want to listen to.
We think that what we're listening to is a universal opinion. It's only ours. Back to us in this algorithm, which is letting us hear and share that which we agree to.
So to answer your question, yes, I speak nationally, but I would love to speak more where there's a counter opinion on stage, and so we're able to offer both sides an opinion. In a civil way, in a civil discourse, in order to be able to have people make their own decisions based on their belief system. We're not doing enough of that.
No, like last night we had dinner with a huge liberal friend of mine, and
great discussion.
And I think that he'd be more than interested to work with you on a documentary on this topic.
But you even look at the news stations today; everyone's so slanted towards one view, and even when a news station is slanted towards one point of view, put somebody else from the same point of view, they get decimated by their audience members.
The other thing is people watch documentaries where they agree with the opinion of the filmmaker.
Yeah, and so I think we definitely need to restore the ability to critically think and have folks from different opinions who can be on stage together without devolving into a name calling exercise, but just
critical thinking has become obsolete
and discuss the ideas in a way that tries to raise awareness and potentially even change an opinion of somebody in the audience.
Well, this has been, there's a lot to digest in this conversation.
Yeah.
A lot. But I tend to agree with most of your points of view. I have some moral issues with some of the stuff, but I guess there's always going to be that counterbalance where you have to find the middle ground. There's always sacrifice.
Yeah, and look, I mean, there's a lot of folks, I'm sure, among your listeners that, you look at issues like technology in general. I mean, it can be scary, but it also can offer a lot of promise. Technology, particularly AI, artificial intelligence, has the potential to solve a lot of problems for us, to include our energy
these
concern,
problems,
right? The goal is, how do you put the manufacturing base in place that you trust? I mean, that's a concern. I mean, you put stuff out on the cloud, you don't know who potentially can get into it. So you have to have technology that you can trust, that you feel is secure and safe for you personally, and ultimately you can use to solve some of these big problems, to include the gap between energy supply and demand. So I'm a big optimist. That's my entire life. I've always focused on, what can be done, and as long as we apply the effort, bust my tail every day to try to raise awareness and say, okay, here's our way forward. You gotta maintain a positive energy that you and I share, even on a personal level.
Have you seen this documentary? What is it called? It's a Oliver Stone documentary.
On nuclear power?
Yeah.
Yeah, he did a pretty good job.
I think he did a great job.
Yep, no, it's a great place to start for your listeners.
I think everybody should see that film.
Yeah.
I really do.
And
my listeners will like it because There was a lot of conspiracy theories peppered into the documentary.
Well, he was that personal story is I had a chance to go to the opening of that. I mean, he was a skeptic at first, and then as he learned more about it, he realized, oh my gosh, there's so much that's happening now that no one's talking about. So he had some developers on there like Oklo, great company. I know the DeWitts who started it, both MIT grads. Having them on and talking about the new technology is exactly what Oliver was trying to do. He was trying to say, wait a minute, people are stuck in 60-year-old concerns.
Right, no nukes.
But this isn't what's happening today, and this is the future for us. And so we need more of those. We need folks to say, hey, let's talk. Let's go on the Idaho National Lab website, learn. Let's level the awareness, level the education. Now let's discuss, okay, what are the pros and cons? But you got to get to the point where you're willing to open up and
right. Well, he does talk about how the entertainment industry has really hurt the nuclear movement as well.
It's the sensationalist movies. It's the movies where you go, oh my gosh, we never want to do that. I mean, they've had a Netflix series on Chernobyl and on 3 Mile Island and those are pretty scary.
Right, and the China syndrome that came out in the 70s, which really...
Jim, that was a big one, right around 3 Mile Island, too.
Right around the same time, coincidentally. I believe.
So I think, I mean, and look, I hate to say this, what most people today, young people today, what their exposure is to nuclear power plants is what they see on The Simpsons. With the green ooze coming down from the power plant on the hill. So I think we have to move beyond that.
Right. And our bodies are clearly able to absorb a portion of radiation. We do, we're exposed to the sun every day.
Yep.
Right? MRIs and X-rays and all these things. I think.
Well, it's also you have to raise awareness of where technology has come to make reactors safer. And cleaner, safer, engineering's better, they're smaller.
Well, people don't realize that submarines are powered by reactors.
They are.
And there have never been any that have blown up or there's
the Navy's program is very rigid. They go through a lot of effort to protect their operations, their sailors, and their ships. So they spend a lot of time engineering safety into those programs.
Well, hopefully that's what you're going to be doing for us in terms of your reactors.
I'm hoping that I convince one person that's listening to this to get in touch, either through you, and say, hey, you know what? I believe in this too, and we just need to raise awareness, Taylor.
I think there's a whole movement towards it. And Joe Rogan did a podcast on nuclear energy, and he gets 10 million listeners per episode.
And it really is, to me, a viable, clean energy source that's base load. That's 24/7 it runs, and it can run for 50 years. So
it sounds like it's the way to go.
It is. We just need to reinvest. Part of the problem is the licensing process is really onerous right now. So we're trying to streamline that a little bit, but the most important thing is we have to invest to get these reactors back into the grid and keep building them.
How many are in the process of being built right now?
So we have different manufacturers going at it. We have 2 reactors that just went online in Georgia, but they were over budget significantly and long beyond schedule. So what we're moving towards is what they call a modular development, where you build them on an assembly line and you ship them. So that's going to reduce the cost, but there's still an upfront cost associated with that. So as far as under construction, new reactors, but believe it or not, Bill Gates has got a company called TerraPower, and so they're building the Natrium reactor right now as we speak up in Kemmerer, Wyoming, in collaboration with local utility. So you have folks that realize that this is the future. People that we've considered to be visionaries in the past are like, we need to do this. So there are a couple that are being built in the country, but really the next generation is still in development.
Got it. Okay, Lucian.
All right.
You packed a lot in today.
I know. I talk fast, being from Philadelphia and all that.
Hey, look, it's perfect. It's perfect. The world is moving quickly.
It is.
Information is being released quickly. So I think that, young minds are able to absorb that.
Well, I'm thrilled. We talked about this a few weeks ago, and you're like, I've got to have you on my podcast. And I'm just thrilled, Taylor. You see it, you understand why, and you're willing to present my viewpoint or share that.
Our viewpoint.
Our viewpoint. And I think we just need more of this. We need folks like yourself that, they can continue to want to work with your listenership and work with others and saying, hey, let's at least look at this honestly. Let's be educated and aware of it. So appreciate you taking the effort.
I think momentum is building.
Yeah.
And I think you're a great voice for it. You're
so much.
passionate and you clearly believe it. So
I
that's
also studied it, so it's not like I'm coming at this blind.
putting your money where your mouth is. Thank you so much for joining us. Part 2 to be continued.
Cybersecurity.
Cybersecurity.
Oh my gosh.
Which I know very little about.
Yes.
That I'm not going to be able to weigh in.
Yeah, it is. It's up there. Those are the two threats I think we're faced with: cyber and power. So look forward to coming back next time out in LA. We'd love to talk to you about that.
Thank you for your service and your continued service.
I appreciate it. Thanks for your support.
Bye, darling.